Okay, so let me start with a simple question. What was the closest humanity has been to nuclear war? Well, you're probably thinking about the Ukrainian war. But what if I told you that in reality, the time closest to a nuclear war happened during the Cold War? The time the United States of America and the USSR almost went to a nuclear war happened during the Cold War.
The period of time where the Soviet Union and America keep competing with each other to have more power over them, blah blah blah.
You know the drill, but they were like little kids. That's what powerful countries do, right? So, anyways, during the Cold War, many conflicts and crises happened, but we're only going to focus on the Cuban Missile Crisis. Started just after America tried to or actually invaded the Cuba island and failed. Like the original purpose of America to invade the island was to take down Fidel Castro, as he was a communist leader and well, United States didn't like him. Fortunately, this plan failed. This event was well known worldwide, and the USSR took advantage of it. Former premier of the Soviets at the time, Nikita Khrushchev, made a secret agreement with Fidel Castro. This agreement consisted on to arm the nuclear missiles in Cuba to supposedly protect Cuba, but we all know the reason. Like, we all know that's not the reason. I see you, Khrushchev. I see you. So, anyways, the Soviets delivered the missiles and they started arming them. Unfortunately for the Americans, as this was a secret agreement, the president of the U.S. at the time, John F. Kennedy, took a while to notice. But after sending some U-2 spy planes, he discovered that they were actually arming nuclear missiles, a close range, long range. Like they had many missiles. So of course, the United States frankly freaked out. Like, why you tell me? Well, one of our closest neighbors had almost armed nuclear weapons, and they didn't get along quite well. Plus, the neighbors were now your enemy's best friend. Quite scary, right? So what did they do? Well, if it was not because former ex-president John F. Kennedy was a very kind and reasonable man, yeah, United States would have bombed Cuba. Like, yeah, they would have gone straight to war. But John Kennedy didn't want that, as he knew the dangers of that action, especially because it was inevitable at that point that they were going to go to a nuclear war. So instead, they made an ocean barricade to stop all the Soviet ships coming to Cuba. So they basically quarantined Cuba to stop these missiles arriving to Cuba. And furthermore, they sent a letter to Khrushchev stating that the United States would not tolerate this act of aggression, they called it that way. And furthermore, they demanded for the USSR to dismantle these weapons and bring them back to their nation, because they consider it like a threat and an act of aggression, as I already said. But like, why Khrushchev? Like, why would Khrushchev do that? Like, we all know that he's not dumb, and we all knew that he was trying to win something by playing. So after some time, the Soviets didn't care and they just ignored the United States demands. But the crisis escalated when US discovered through two U-2 spy planes that the missiles were actually very close to completion and they were almost ready to attack, and so they got scared. And what they basically did was to declare that they were ready to attack Cuba if necessary and take countermeasures against the Soviets and Cuba. So after that, Khrushchev sent a letter to the U.S. stating that they will dismantle the weapons and take them back on the condition the United States wouldn't attack Cuba in the future. And also, he sent a second letter demanding for them to remove the nuclear missiles they had on Turkey. So, if you don't know this, at the time, the United States of America already had some nuclear missiles or nuclear armament in Turkey, which was really close to Russia or the Soviet Union. So the USSR was really preoccupied, so they took advantage of this. And yeah, that was the ulterior motive that encouraged Khrushchev to do this, and it wasn't a strategic war advantage. It was just an act to make to force the United States to remove or to take back their advantage. So yeah, Khrushchev was mad, but he wasn't so reckless because he didn't want a war. He just wanted safe insurance, if you could call it that. So yeah, as I already said, John F. Kennedy was also a reasonable man, and he accepted these conditions and also admitted that the Americans were going to remove these missiles anyway. Like the missiles in Turkey, they would remove them anyway, like in 6 months. But anyway, the missiles were removed. But the sad part is that Fidel Castro didn't know anything about these conversations. So yeah, Cuba ended up being just a pawn in the USSR game. So yeah, the world actually saved itself because of the careful nature of the two leaders of the United States and the USSR. But what if they actually went to war? Who would have won? I don't know a lot about wars, but in my personal opinion, I think that none of the two countries would win. Well, let me explain. As it is a nuclear war, I think that there's no chance for a country to completely win this war. I think that the two nations would actually lose something. But technically speaking, the United States would win, only because they had more allies. You see, the USSR had more nuclear weapons, that's true, but the thing is, it doesn't, like, the numbers doesn't matter. The one nuclear weapon is capable of doing a lot of damage to anything, to and anywhere. So yeah, and although Russia had these missiles in Cuba, United States also had in Turkey. So at the end, the destruction of these two countries was going to be inevitable. So, but I think that in the long run, the United States would win, as it had a lot of allies all around the world, especially in Western Europe, which were also powerful. Not as powerful as the Soviets or the Americans, but they were powerful. They were rich somehow. So yeah, although the Soviets also attacked these allies, I think that it wouldn't be enough. So I think that United States would have been able to recover itself with the help of his allies, while the Soviets would just end up in that hole and never get as powerful as they were before. So on the other hand, although I think the United States would technically win, I think that the most benefited countries of that war would be the actual non-affected countries of the war, the one that didn't involve themselves or weren't just attacked or harmed, as although they could have lost economic relationships with these two great nations, however, their economy would grow exponentially, and like they would have a great impact on economy, as like now the two greatest nations in the world are like a third country, like third developed country. They're in the ruins. So I think that, for example, the countries in South America would be very powerful. I don't know, maybe if that war actually happened, the superpowers we know today weren't going to be the same. Like, I don't know, maybe a Gran Colombia too. Who knows? This war could have affected not only the destiny of these huge nations, but also the destiny of other small nations. Changing topics, the Cold War wasn't a peaceful and nice time for the world, but it wasn't all that bad. For example, if it weren't for the Cold War, video games would not be the same as we know them today. So let me explain. So after the Sputnik crisis, which was when the USSR placed a satellite around Earth, the United States made a massive technological investment in America, and this gave rise to many initiatives, like the Advanced Research Projects Agency, who later created the precursor to the internet. So without it, life itself and the video game industry would not be the same today, because now video games depend rely too much on internet. Also, during the space age, or basically the time where United States and the Soviet Union had this competition on discovering or exploring the space, who got to the moon first, etc. Blah blah blah. Well, actually, during this time, computers became an essential part of the academia, meaning that new programmers came and rise with all such different kind of games, which were also inspired in like the actual moment. So it's funny because many games like Space War were created, and not only that, but the video game industry started forming as they created this arcades, so which they would sell to the stores or to people, and yeah, they would actually earn profit, and was not used for investigation purposes. The games actually like managed to gain money. So that's like the origin of the video game industry. Also, the Cold War. On the Cold War, the planes were the most crucial weapon used. Used because I know that nuclear missiles were something. But anyway, they were not only used for spying purposes, but they also carried these nuclear weapons, and at the same time, they were very expensive, like very expensive. So these countries, these nations wouldn't just risk the soldiers and the plane to practice, right? So when the pilots were studying aviation and all of this, they created the flight simulators to train the pilots without taking the risk we already talked about, because the pilot could waste his life, and maybe the plane could crash, and it was very expensive to build new ones like every day. So yeah, this was very useful, but also this flight simulator gave so many options to the programmers to create new games, and they created so many games of planes in the war. Yeah, it was like a revolution. Also, did you know that the analog used to calculate a projectile trajectory during war? Were used to make a lot of games like Tennis for Two. Tennis for Two was like a more modern version of Pong, and it was huge. because actually many games started implementing this analog to create more and more games. So it's quite interesting to see how technology used for war was actually being used to make games for kids, for little kids. So yeah, it was very good. Interesting to know that. And yeah, also the crisis we talked about in this video, the Cuban Missile Crisis, inspired a lot of the strategy games we see today. Not only on Rise of Kingdom, the things that really annoys you when you're watching YouTube, but it created so many games like Red Storm Rising, which was one of the first strategy games, very popular. And yeah, like the player had to calculate its options to attack with a nuclear bomb, or like hold back, like mostly what the presidents and leaders of the United Kingdom, the United States and the Soviet Union did. So yeah, it inspired a lot of games. Finally, the multiple crises of the Cold War inspired various games: Rise of Nations, Battlefield, and Call of Duty Cold War. The name says it itself. So yeah, at least the Cold War didn't just give us fear, it also gave us Call of Duty. So yeah, in conclusion, the Cold War was a period of time in which the Earth really suffered a lot. Like, not directly, but like it was a constant fear of a nuclear war that could have broke out and caused so much damage. But at the end, people are very smart, and they know how to use these periods of grief or fear to create many useful things for life. And I just talked about video games, but it really made a huge impact in all senses, not only political, economically speaking, video games, dance. It made a lot of impact. So yeah, it's quite good to take back and actually take a time to reflect on the good things of the bad things. So yeah, please like and subscribe and share the video with all your friends, because I want a 10